For staying with KTN Prime, we now shift our focus to health issues, particularly the vaccination campaign taking place across the country in a bid to curb typhoid, measles and rubella. Now, these diseases still pose a risk to our children, especially in areas with poor sanitation and low vaccination coverage. I don't know what you know about it, but let's get more information from my guest tonight. I'll begin with my immediate right, Dr. Abdallah Bajaber. Good evening. Thank you so much for making time. He is a consultant pediatrician and the Secretary General of the Kenya Association of Muslim Medical Professionals, also known as KMMP. Next to him, we have Sujata Kotamraju. She is the chairperson of the Hindu Council of Kenya. Good evening. Thank you so much for making time.
Good evening.
And last but not least, we have Dr. Shamsa Ahmed. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you.
She is a physician specializing in infectious diseases, and she currently leads the Infection Prevention Committee and the Infectious Disease Clinic at MP Shah Hospital. I believe I got everyone's right?
Yeah.
Okay, perhaps let's begin with this burden, Daktari, of measles, rubella, and typhoid in Kenya. Where are we at, especially in children?
Thank you very much for that question. I think the current statistics...
Just hold your thought. I believe we have a challenge with your mic, but perhaps, Daktari, you can step in. Talk to us about the burden and where we're at.
So I think first we understand what kind of diseases they are.
Yeah.
So when you look at typhoid, this is what we call a diarrheal illness. It's something that is caused by a bacteria called Salmonella typhi, and it is transmitted oral fecally. That literally means that if somebody is excreting this in their feces and we end up eating it, that's how we end up with that infection. So if you have contaminated food, contaminated water, that's how you'll pick up that infection.
Okay.
When you look at things like measles and rubella, those are viral infections or aerosol droplet. So that means if somebody has the infection and they're coughing and they're sneezing, that's how they're going to end up transmitting it to you. And even the symptoms of that will be a little bit different.
Okay.
So typhoid, you'll end up with things like diarrhea. Then you get non-specific things like a fever, very high fevers, malaise, you're very exhausted. With measles and rubella, you will get the rash that we all talk about. And, you know, there's a slight difference between measles and rubella. Rubella is what we used to call German measles, right? And I know we'll talk about it a little bit more, but when you look at these infections, we have what, in terms of burden or calling something endemic, these are things that are in our community and we keep having them going up and down. So something like typhoid, we have quite a bit in our community. When they did a study here about 10 years ago in Kenya, you're looking at about 95 cases per 100,000.
Yeah.
That might not sound a lot, but when you look at fatality, in patients that we treat, you'll still have about 1 to 4% who die despite getting treatment. And people who are not treated, you have about 10 to 20% chance of dying from typhoid.
Okay.
When you look at something like measles, we've been having outbreaks, and of course, Daktari is a pediatrician, so he's been seeing them more.
Yeah.
But in the last 1 year, between January last year and February this year, we had about 2,900 cases of measles in the country, and we had about 18 deaths. And you know, when it comes to children, even a single death is too much. So that's where we are right now when we talk about the burden, what we're having in our community, and how it's actually affecting all of us.
All right, just looking at it, when you say 2,900 cases of measles, is that bad or is that...
That's bad.
Okay.
That's bad because when you look at a disease, you ask yourself, is it something that you can prevent? And the way we prevent things like measles is vaccines. So you see, the measles and rubella vaccine, it's not new. It's something that's been part of our schedule for children for a very long time.
Okay.
You get it at 9 months and then you get a booster at 18 months. So what happens is, one, people don't follow the whole schedule. So maybe you only do the first one and you don't do the follow-up one. Two, you can't always tell if you mount the correct response with the vaccine. So maybe you got the vaccine and you didn't get enough coverage from it. So that's why you usually have to have some boosters.
Okay.
So we are not covering as many people as we should. So to have somebody die of a disease that we can prevent, that is unacceptable. So even that's why I'm saying even a single case, because remember, for anybody who's a parent, the moment your child is sick, the entire house is sick. It's no longer just that child. The mother is sick, the father is sick. You feel like, you know, you're not able to go to work. And having this small child who's unable to communicate, extremely ill, and then looking at the possible complications. Because
Yeah.
even if you don't die from a disease, things like measles, you can end up with brain damage, you can end up with deafness. So that means you have a child who now has a permanent disability for the rest of their life from something that we could prevent. So
Okay.
even a single case, for me, is completely unacceptable.
All right, Dr. coming to you. I mean, she said that you are a pediatrician, so you deal with these cases. What do you see on a daily basis?
So we've recently had what I would call an upsurge of measles cases in the sense that we had a lot of cases that were picked that, actually are confirmed cases of measles. And if you look at the numbers, actually, from early 2023 to 2024, we've had over 3,000 cases so far. And, we've had about 18 deaths, and as Dr. rightfully said, a case or a death of one child, is very hard to bear as a pediatrician or as a doctor to look at. And they come with all sorts of complications. You have, as Dr. said, brain issues, you have respiratory issues, pneumonias, you have diarrhea. And these things are actually complicated with our current situation in Kenya. You have low coverage, you have issues with sanitation and water, you have socioeconomic issues where children come with severe malnutrition. So it complicates a lot of things, and what we see is actually very heartbreaking in our setup.
All right,
Yeah.
Sujatha, coming to you, apologies for that. Why is it important for faith-based organizations, like, for example, the Hindu Council that you're in, to be involved in such issues, national health campaign?
Yeah, thank you for having me here, and it is my privilege and honor to be here to meet you all and sitting between these two doctors here as a religious leader.
Yeah.
Faith-based organizations, I say, fortunately, most of the Kenyans are religious people. Once we talk as a religious leader, they trust us. And as faith-based organizations, I also work closely with Interreligious Council. So we all religious leaders, we sit together and we'll say we work very closely with this Ministry of Health and that the campaign, whatever they are doing it. And we'll prepare the booklet. We already prepared one booklet for Faith for Life. And we give the scriptures, references, taking this Bible, Quran and Gita, why it is important, these vaccines. So we work very closely with the Ministry of Health, and all the faith leaders will sit together and we talk and we campaign about these vaccines.
All right, and what has been the response, especially from the Hindu community?
Hindu community, we don't have issues when we interact with them. We don't have much, they positively take it, the vaccines. But sometimes, like other communities, they have some misunderstandings. Also, they're having about the safety of that vaccine and the side effects of that vaccine. Sometimes they're having this. So as a faith leaders, we always open dialogue with them. And we call the professionals to talk to them. And we have to convince them. And we have, like a faith leaders, we have a lot of patience. We'll sit with them, we listen to them carefully with the empathy. So then they will say, this is the problem we are expecting, or we are having this this misunderstanding, or we are worried about this problem, the side effects. Mostly they are worried about the side effects. So we'll listen to them first, then we'll open the dialogue. And we call the professionals and the health experts. They will talk to them. So slowly we'll convince them. Eventually they take the child for the vaccine.
All right, that's a really good point she's raising. There's so much misconception. First of all, I've had that if, for example, you don't get measles when you're a kid, you have to either way in your life. I don't know if that's true, but there's so much surrounding these diseases in terms of misconception. Are they safe? What are the side effects? I mean, last year, was it last year or 8 months ago, we just saw some children die because of a polio vaccine. Talk to us about that.
So I think when you look at vaccines, one, as healthcare professionals, also as Ministry of Health, and of course the support from all the faith-based is, we need to be very honest and transparent about what we are doing. And unless we empower people with the education and the information, then of course the disinformation is what's going to get through. And you see, understandably, there's always fear when it comes to any kind of medication. And with a vaccine, especially if you're going to give it to a child, those are pertinent and very relevant questions when we talk about what are the side effects and what are the adverse effects. What we need to understand is there's a difference in those terms. Side effects sometimes are expected things that happen when you take a medication. So you see, what is a vaccine, first of all? A vaccine is usually either a killed or a weakened version of the disease that we're trying to protect you from. So we're trying to give you a version that's safe of the disease, and then your immunity responds. So the next time when you actually come into contact with that disease, your immunity is ready and knows how to manage it. It doesn't mean you won't get the disease. It means that when you get it, it won't be as severe, right? Or sometimes it'll pass and you won't even notice that you've gotten it. By the time a vaccine is brought in, it's not that I've sat in my kitchen and put it together. It's had to go through rigorous testing, whether it's through the pharmaceutical industries, and then it has to go through many bodies before it gets here. So when we talk about something like this new typhoid vaccine, and someone like me who deals with infectious diseases and infection prevention, I'm very excited about vaccines. Anything that can prevent a disease and stop you from getting sick, I'm 100% behind. So when you come and tell me that now we have what is called TCV, or the typhoid conjugate vaccine, it didn't come up yesterday. You see, we're also at the end of it. We receive things a lot later. These are things that have been rolled out in other places. They continue to do studies. They continue to do safety profiles, so that by the time something like WHO is putting its weight behind it, by the time the Ministry of Health is putting their weight behind it, then you know that this is a safe vaccine for our children. But for us, again, the responsibility is to answer those questions, not to shy away when someone asks you, is this a bad vaccine? Will something happen to my child? We should be able to give that information. We should also be able to say, if you took your child to this particular place and you got a vaccine and now you have concerns, where do you take this child to ask those questions? Do we have a hotline? Do we have a facility? Do we have a pediatrician? And if you walk that journey, then you'll find we managed to combat all this misinformation. We're able to answer these questions, and the uptake of these vaccines will be very good, because there's not a single parent who wants to see their child sick. And remember, the vaccines you give in childhood protect them as they become teenagers, and then protect them as they become adults. So I think the onus a lot is on us to make sure that we have forums like this to share that information, to answer the questions, and to be there as we go along. And remember, even these vaccines, it's not like once it's given, everything stops. There's always something called drug surveillance, which means you continue to monitor these things even 30, 40 years later. So now when you look at the current vaccine for typhoid, what we're using right now, you can use it in a younger age group. You know, the previous ones you could only use in above age 2. That's a very big population of children that were left alone without getting vaccination. It gives you a longer immunity. It gives you a stronger immune response. And remember, at the end of the day, we're a developing country. We have a lot of this rural-urban migration going on. You can see all these high-rises. Where is that sewage going? Where is that water going? So there's nothing like maybe people sitting in areas where they think that they are immune because it's a slightly posher area. At the end of the day, our water sources are all similar. The people who are working in the food industry or coming to work in your house are coming from those areas. So nobody is immune in this. So I think it's for us to be very transparent, have the answers, talk to the community, and then we'll be able to get this rolling, and we'll get a really good uptake for it.
All right, Dr. She's saying no one is immune, but there are those who feel like, you know, natural immunity is better. So for those who prefer not to get vaccines, can they still make it?
So there's natural immunity, and then there's acquired immunity. Now, a lot of people will be saying, my child already got vaccinated with these same vaccines. But let's look at the facts that Dr. shared before, that our coverage, the intended coverage, is supposed to be about 95% for you to reach what we call herd immunity. And we had that a lot during the COVID period. But we are nowhere near 95%.
In your natural immunity?
In our natural
Where are we at, if I may ask?
No, I mean in terms of the vaccination coverage in the country. We need to be at about 95%, like 95% of the population need to be immunized for you to actually talk about herd immunity.
Okay.
Just as an example, among some of the cases that we saw of measles, if you ask some of the patients verbatim whether they're fully vaccinated, they'll tell you yes. But it was only after follow-up, after we got the measles outbreak cases, that we actually looked into their books and all that and realized they either got one dose of the MR vaccine, or they didn't get the measles vaccine, or they actually lied about it, or they didn't know about it. Yeah. So natural immunity is not the end of it because of several reasons. One, we are not at full coverage. So you have, number two, you have waning immunity. You know, these vaccines are supposed to give you some form of immunity, but after some time the immunity, reduces. Number three is, on the government perspective of public health, is the issue of traceability. If we can't, we're not digitized in a way to trace all the vaccination coverage in the country, and we've had cases of an outbreak, then it clearly shows that there's need to give a booster a vaccine, which, as Dr. said, with all those measures, the risk versus the benefit, actually, if you look at it, the benefit outweighs the risk, because you're covering a lot of people who might not have been covered.
Yeah.
And it also protects even those who have been vaccinated before, because they interact with people who have not been vaccinated. We are not, if you're isolated, then that's a different case. But you go, the kids go to school with a lot of kids that are not vaccinated, and so it's not that easy to reach the herd immunity that we're actually talking about.
But there are those who genuinely just don't want to go that direction. Do they have an option?
Yeah, I think when you talk about public health perspective, what the ministry does is, the ministry has a responsibility to cover everyone.
Yeah.
So what they do is they send a notification to the school that we have this campaign ongoing, and that we are going to come and vaccinate the children. From what I understand and what is acceptable is that we do not expect a parent to say, yes, you can vaccinate a child, but the opposite, that if you feel like you need to opt out, then you need to sign it, and you need to be explained in a proper manner. And that's why Dr. was talking about communication, and let people know how the cases have been, what are the consequences of missing the vaccine. And I don't think there's anyone who's been actually forced to take the vaccine if they opt out of taking the vaccines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Coming to you, Sujatha, beyond health, how do you think immunization contributes to well-being of society, both spiritually, economically, and socially?
Yes, this health, we're only talking about the vaccines and the health. But if you see in the community, how the family is going to affect, economically, if the child is sick, how much that family is going to spend the money to the hospitals. Yeah. Even other kids, the siblings, they have this, this emotional, that one is, the brother is sick and is going to the hospital. Parents are so tensed to taking care of that child. And here the medical is very expensive. And the financially it is going to affect the family. And emotionally they're all affected in this one. So it is, the whole family is disturbed. There is no balance. So it is very important. It is not only the health. We can look at the economical side and also emotional side. So we have to balance everything in the family.
Okay.
So it is very important.
All right. Dr. coming back to you, because you said something that caught my attention. The fact that we are seeing buildings, sewages blocked, and there's the issue of sanitation equally. This needs a sort of a concerted effort, for lack of a better word or a better term. Do we have frequent meetings with different sectors to ensure that, even as we continue, for example, to the construction sector or different sectors, we're still streamlined in terms of health?
Ideally, we're supposed to.
But we don't.
Ideally, we're supposed to. But
Okay.
clearly, if you look at how some buildings are coming up in certain areas, there are things that are being bypassed. And we also have to understand what is within the realm of our control, right? So one is when we start to do these campaigns, you definitely put a spotlight on things that we're talking about, because we start to talk about water and sanitation, and we start looking at the communities that poverty is going to play a role, meaning obviously somebody who comes from a lower socioeconomic status is going to end up more likely to fall sick, less likely to get to a hospital, and more likely to have the repercussions of that disease. So it's good when we have these campaigns, because then you'll put spotlights on things like that.
Yeah.
So our expectation obviously is that, government agencies that are supposed to okay construction and do those kind of things, do the work that they're supposed to, but we're also realistic about what we see on the ground. So then I'd go back and say, so what can I do as an individual? Because clearly I can't change the sewage in Parklands and Westlands. But what I can do is I can vaccinate my child, so that even if they're exposed in this kind of a setting, they have some kind of immunity against that.
Yeah.
So we hope that as we do these campaigns, then you see everything goes together. Because it's easy for me to say that you need to have, like, I want you to boil your water so that you don't get typhoid. But have I bothered to check that the area you're in, whether you even get piped water?
Yeah.
Yeah, like where are you getting your water source from? Yeah. So as we do this, we hope that, the powers that be, or the people who are listening here, are also going to put in the effort in terms of those things. But again, what is in our hands? What is in our hands right now is the opportunity to protect your children and essentially your families and your communities by getting a vaccine that is free.
Okay, Daktari. So there's typhoid, there's measles and rubella. Yes. Why are we giving them all together? Are they going to affect each other?
No. If you look at it, I mean, this is a campaign that is outside the routine, the vaccination that we usually have, which is called the KEPI vaccination, Kenya Extended Program for Immunization. These vaccines, most of the vaccines are usually given together. All along, if you ask anyone, they go and get the child vaccinated, they would get more than one vaccines. The measles and rubella is given together, and then the typhoid is given separately. Yeah, and there's no harm at all. We've had in certain period during a child's growth, you get even more than 2 vaccinated, because a child is given vaccines from the time they're born, then 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 14 weeks, and so on.
Yeah.
They're part of those periods that they actually get more than 5, vaccines all over the world, and it hasn't caused any issues. But the reason for this is because of cost benefit as well. I understand, as maybe Dr. probably didn't mention, but she agreed to this. The typhoid cases we're seeing now are actually multi-drug resistant.
Okay.
Meaning that for you to actually treat a confirmed typhoid case now, it will take a lot. The usual drugs that we used to give are not working anymore.
Yeah.
Rubella can actually affect pregnant mothers, and with very bad outcomes. And we talked about the measles as well. So they're actually the measles, rubella given together, and then the typhoid vaccine is separate, but they're all given at the same period.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why does this campaign speak to you personally? How and why? Do you have perhaps your own personal reasons as to why this campaign is really key and important in your life?
As a community leader, in our Hinduism, we'll say is dharma, that is our duty. As a community leader, I have to take care of our community welfare, especially on the health sector. And we also say, we all agree, health is wealth.
Yeah.
So first we have to take care of the health. So as a community leader, I will always talk to our community, their needs and their welfare. Why they are the children, if the children are sick, no parent will be happy. So that's why they say, the parents are having so many, they think twice before they take the child for the vaccine. So we have to give the comfort as a leader. So that's why I will attend most of these the workshops, seminars, the organized by Ministry of Health and some NGOs. Even last week I was there, the global listening program with the faith leaders. So I will attend, whatever the knowledge I will achieve, whatever I'll get it, I will pass it to our community. This is the good one you take. All the religious leaders, we are there on the workshops and also the seminars. This Ministry of Health, they are teaching us to promote, to take this vaccine.
Okay.
So we listen to them, and we also say prevention is better than cure. So why don't you take this one? So as a leader, it is important to educate my community and take their welfare. And,
Okay.
you know,
All right, and because Dr. mentioned the issue of the fact that we all need to play a role. When it comes to the issue of construction, ensuring sanitation, leaders play a huge role. Perhaps in your council, have you interacted with various sectors and tried, to streamline it?
Yes, myself, just I will talk about the
Yeah.
rural areas.
Okay.
I went myself to Bamba, Jila, even the Turkana, Lodwar. There in the schools, there are 3,000 children, yeah? And they have only 2 toilets. Yeah? When we are talking about the hygiene, with the 3,000 children, 2 toilets, how it is going to help? So that's where we will take the help of this UNICEF, USAID, and also the Hindu community. We are helping them to have these boreholes. Yeah? And we'll say safe water. Water is very important. And also we are taking some help of like Mombasa Cement to help us. So that's why now they are having, now I think it will be ready by next month, 14 toilets we are building there. It is so that hygiene is very important. So that's why when we go to the schools, and there is no washrooms, there is no toilets, and there is no water facility to wash their hands after visiting the toilet. And before taking the food, there is no water facility. So that's why we said as a community, we want to have this safe water for our children, clean water. And they can, they know all the protocols. After visiting the washroom, they have to, but if there is no water, how to clean their hands? Then with the same hand, they used to have the food. So these are the things we'll take it. So water is very important. And also this hygiene, these protocols, we have to teach them. So these are the things we'll do it. Even here, when we say there is no water, you see only the buildings. As Dr. said, only the buildings are coming. So when I went for the other meeting, they said Nairobi it's only for 2 million people. Now there are 7 million people in this Nairobi. Now how we are getting this water? What water we are drinking? So it is so much is there for the hygiene.
Okay.
So we have to work on this. It is not the only one community. We have to all work together. We have to come together and see the problem. How to do it, this one for our community, for our society, to give this healthy environment.
Okay. Dr. Someone is asking, what are the side effects, number 1? And 2, for example, you have taken your child to school and they're immunized or vaccinated and they come home and they have these side effects. How do you deal with them as a parent?
So usually with most vaccines, most vaccines, you'll tend to find that the site that they gave the vaccine sometimes is a little bit painful, maybe a little bit red, and then the biggest thing you tend to see is maybe a bit of a fever, So your child might be a little bit irritable, a little bit unhappy, and even doc will tell you, will allow you to give that child some kind of paracetamol or something to alleviate the fever and the pain in that duration. Sometimes, depending on the vaccine, you might get some of the symptoms, which means we're talking about you can get a runny nose and a cough, with measles. So you might end up with a bit of a runny nose and a cough. Some people get a very slight rash, but not the kind of rash that you get when you actually have measles.
Okay.
When you get the typhoid vaccine, you'll get something similar. Some people get maybe a little bit of diarrhea, maybe a little bit of vomiting. All of those things are supposed to be very self-limiting, which means they're not going to go on for 1 to 2 weeks. It shouldn't be making your child actively sick. That meaning now they're vomiting and having diarrhea, they're not able to retain anything. Usually you find within a day or 2, all of these things resolve and your child goes back to normal. In fact, you tend to find the parents are the ones who are a little more affected by the vaccine, watching their child get the vaccine than the actual vaccine.
Really?
We speak from personal experience.
Okay.
But everything is self-limiting. So usually we'll tell you can give the child a bit of paracetamol syrup. Maybe on that site you can use a cold compress or a warm compress, and in a day or 2 this child should be fine.
Okay.
Now, everyone is different with the medication. everything has side effects. You need to understand even too much water has a side effect. Yeah. So if you find you're worried, your child is having a persistent fever and you feel that it's not responding to the medication you're giving, maybe this child is now having vomiting and diarrhea and they can't retain anything, or you find your child is extremely lethargic, because there's always a chance. You can always have that one child, maybe even out of 200,000, who reacts badly. Take the child to hospital. What you need at that point is a clinician who's skilled in children to try and see what has happened.
Okay.
Yeah, was there an issue with the immune response? Was the immune response overactive? Have they ended up actually getting the illness from the vaccine? And like I said, we need to be honest when you get vaccines. Everyone is different. My mother is older than me. She got her COVID vaccine. She was walking around perfect. I got COVID vaccine. I was down for 2 days. So everybody's different. And yet, despite that, I still went ahead and got about 3 vaccines. And even if they bring a recombinant, I will be first in line because I understand the benefits.
Okay.
So everything should be slight, self-limiting. Child should feel good within 2 to 3 days. But as a parent or a caregiver, if you are concerned, just take that child to the nearest health facility to allay your fears, and for a health professional to make sure that there's nothing going wrong with the child.
Now I'm curious, do all vaccines sort of have reactions? Because you've talked about runny nose, maybe a fever, and diarrhea, and maybe some vomiting, if I'm not wrong. Because those are similar symptoms that people experience during the COVID. So are most vaccines likely to react the same?
So the truth is, your body can only show you in limited ways when it's sick. Whether it is an infection, or even if I'm going to take you all the way to something like cancer. Your body can only show you fever, it can show you vomiting and diarrhea, it can show you chills. There's limited things that your body can do. And most of those things are signs of how your immune system responds to any kind of an infection. You get specific symptoms with specific diseases, but like I said, they just tend to be general symptoms. And for any vaccine, it should be self-limiting. It shouldn't be something that lands you back in the hospital. But all vaccines will give you something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Coming to you, Dr. Tari. You want to add on to that point?
Yeah,
Sure.
just to add, is that, not all vaccines, by the way, give you side effects. We've all had kids who've gone for routine vaccine. What she's talking about is what you might get. And remember, we opened by saying these vaccines actually mimic the disease, but they are actually weakened. Yeah, so you're being given a measles kind of a look-alike, but weakened, so that it mounts. It's supposed to mount that immune response in you, and not all of them give you the reaction. Majority, by the way, speaking from experience, I'm a parent. I've not seen much of the side, including the runny nose, but once in a while you might get kids who do get that.
Do we have cases of perhaps long-term side effects?
Very limited cases, and that's why Dr. Ari was saying it's very important, because we need the data. It's very important for you to go to a facility, because we have forms that are specific and that are linked to the Pharmacy and Poisons Board that would pick this vaccine, and before that, all the details of the patient have to be put there, in the sense that if the patient have any other, comorbidity, were they sick before they got the vaccine? Is there, anything that could have caused, or is it the vaccine itself that caused the reaction? But the cases have been very limited, if not recorded.
Okay.
Yes.
I think, to add on, we need to understand that's not just with vaccines, that's with all drugs.
Okay.
Like something like paracetamol we take for granted, But you can take it and be fine. I can take it and go into liver failure. So that's why you see with all drugs, there's usually a reporting mechanism in case you are the individual who has, and that's why there's a difference between a side effect and an adverse effect.
Okay.
Side effect would be that little bit of fever and feeling a little bit lousy. Adverse effect is when you end up getting, something dangerous of taking, after you've taken that medication or taken that vaccine. And then just something, as Doc was saying, so maybe it doesn't get lost in the discussion, you talked about people who say, well, I have natural immunity, or if I get sick, I'll be fine. A lot of our job is prevention, but of course we treat, right? So when you come in with any infection, especially if it's bacterial, we try and look for what's the antibiotic that we can use for you. Now, you live in a country that we can go to the pharmacy and get whatever you want without a prescription, and nobody is following. So a lot of times people are picking medication that they didn't need because it was a viral infection. They take the antibiotic, you feel good in 2 days, so who's going to finish a 5 or 7 day course of the antibiotic? And then tomorrow, you know, when she's not feeling well and she tells me I'm not feeling well, I'll be like, well, you know what, I used this, why don't you use the same thing? All of that, what it's doing is it's causing what we call resistance, yeah? So antimicrobial resistance. Remember, bugs are very smart. They are growing, they're adapting. So the drugs that we have now are not working like how they used to. We used to have a drug called ciprofloxacin that we use for typhoid. Well, now when we look at the typhoid, we have more than 60% is resistant to this ciprofloxacin because it is misused to treat urinary tract infections that don't need it. And, you know, it worked for me, so I'll give it to her, to give it to him, and we'll go on like that. So you can end up in the hospital, and yes, we're there, state of the art, everything, but the kind of typhoid you have doesn't have something to treat it. Then what do we do? Remember, measles and rubella don't have treatment. We don't have actual treatments. We support whatever is going on and the complications. Something like rubella, the concern is a pregnant woman.
Yeah.
So if you get rubella in pregnancy and it's your first trimester, you're actually, you know, that's the time everything is being formed and made in the baby. So that's when you start getting birth defects in the baby. And the mother might just get a flu and didn't even notice. She's not going to end up with a rash or anything major. Yeah. And if I was to ask you how many times have you had a flu in your life that you didn't even bother with?
Yeah.
So she ends up getting that German measles. She doesn't notice. She's pregnant. And depending on whether you're the kind of person who has access or goes to hospitals to get ultrasounds and things like that, you just wait to have your baby. And by the time the baby is being born, the baby has a defect. Are we blind? Are we deaf? Do we have heart problems? So that's why when we are campaigning for these things, yes, maybe we have treatment for some things, but it doesn't mean it's 100%. And we are losing a lot of the drugs that we have because of misuse. Some things don't have treatments. So once you've got it, and we're just going to have to deal with the consequences.
So what happens if you get a shot and you're not aware you're pregnant?
No, so the rubella vaccine, you see, our target right now is children.
Okay.
So that when you're getting it then, you're getting an immunity, and then somewhere in your life you can always have a booster shot. We do booster shots for adults all the time. For most vaccines, you can get a booster in your adulthood. You'll see that now even people who don't want to get vaccines, the moment they want to emigrate, and it's a requirement on a visa, all of these beliefs will go out the window.
Because you need it at that
because you want
point.
the visa and you want that. So you want that new status. So for adults, we do a lot of booster shots. A lot of the same vaccines that you get in childhood, we can give them even one shot as an adult. You see, this campaign right now, as we've said, is outside the normal schedule. It's targeting a certain population. So for typhoid, you know, we're looking at 9 months to 14. For measles, rubella, we're looking for 9 months to 5 years old.
Okay.
For an adult who's coming in, if she wanted to get the measles, rubella vaccine, those are some of the things we will check and tell you, are you pregnant? Do you have this? The different things we do, even for adults, there are many things we have to check before we give you a vaccine. You don't just walk in and we're like, yeah,
All right.
take it.
Okay. Coming to you, perhaps, because she's talked about the fact that people tend to shy away from vaccines. Do you have any member in your community that perhaps you might have encountered that completely refuses to be vaccinated? And perhaps how do you handle it?
You know, mostly our community people, we are not had the issues.
You're lucky.
You're lucky. Even during the COVID time, yes, I was also in the Interfaith Council where the President, His Excellency, is made that our committee, Interfaith Council. So we, all the religious leaders, we are there. And when the COVID vaccine, it came into our country, then after some time, we got the invitation to the State House, where most of our religious leaders, I think 5-6 people, we went to the State House, we took the vaccine with His Excellency, the President. Then immediately the response was very good. Yeah? People started taking, when the religious leaders are taking this vaccine, so when they thought, yes, this is the safe, and they got that trust. So that was a very good example. When we went and we were there in the State House, it is also live telecasted like this. Then the response was very good. So when it is the religious leaders, we can understand. That's why we go for this mental health and the training, the depressions, counseling, So that's why all the religious leaders, we go for these trainings. So it helps. So then we can. But in our community, normally we are not faced with these issues. But I'm talking with other communities. When you are in the committee, in the council, so we'll deal with other communities also.
Okay.
So these are the things that is happening.
All right. So what I'm understanding is right now we have a certain target audience, which is children. Talk to us about, so right now, 9 months to 5 years, for example, or 9 to 14, after they get the first shot, how long should they wait before they take the next shot? And what I am, well, privy with is that when you get vaccinated, there's a booklet or a certificate that you're given. Because this is a child and a mother can easily lose this booklet. How do you keep track? Is there instances where you're given double vaccination? Are there side effects to this as well?
So I'll start from where your last question, whether there are side effects in giving an extra shot, and a lot of studies have not shown any side effects in getting a booster or an extra shot, as Dr. had said.
Even a day after?
Even a day after, even 2 weeks in between. The only thing is that it might not mount an additional response because of the saturation of the vaccine. But you see, from what I understand from the public health perspective, you cannot take that risk to check each and every single person, whether they got the first one or the second one. Now remember, your question of how long after. This is a campaign that is separate from the routine.
Yeah.
In the routine, you get at the 6-month period and the 18-month period for the measles rubella. So this one is given extra. And by the way, the campaigns usually happen almost every 5 years. The challenge that we didn't have this campaign was actually the COVID period, because the last one we had was 2016.
That's a while back.
Yeah, and by 2021, thereabout, we should have had another campaign. I feel like the main challenge that has come now is with all the new things coming, and as Dr. said, and we're all saying here, the messaging that needs to come to the powers be is that let's engage people and talk to them, not at them in the sense that they accept this and they know what the effects are. But giving the shots within a short period, it doesn't have any effect. We have the booklets for the routine vaccination, but during campaign, to achieve that herd immunity, it's given to everyone.
Yeah, and for example, in that campaign period,
Yes.
why shouldn't we monitor? Because you might be dealing with a child, for example, in Kibra, who perhaps had their routine a week ago. And then with this mass campaign, then you're seeing them get,
So I gave you a challenge of how we know ourselves. The literacy level is very low for you to know, for someone to know whether they, remember this is a school. You're asking someone that they got MR. They don't even know what MR vaccine is.
Yeah.
And so because of that safety profile, that it's better for me to cover all of you, knowing that even if you got a while ago and I give you an extra shot, you'll be safe, but at the same time, I'm moving towards achieving herd immunity. That's a safer bet than actually missing some people because they've actually said that they got a shot a while ago. But we talked about the option, the limited option of opting out after you've talked to someone, because I don't think anyone, if you explain properly to them all the things we've mentioned here, the measles cases that I'm struggling to sort in the public sector, the pregnant mother who is getting a baby with birth defects, the typhoid cases with perforated bowels and so on. You explain to them the effects of these diseases and that the vaccines are safe. I don't think anyone would be in a position to refuse this if you actually talk to them nicely. So it's the messaging and the packaging and showing them that it's safe to give these vaccines, even if you had a vaccine before.
Okay.
Yeah.
But even so, when you follow the normal schedule for all children, like Doc said, there's a booklet. Usually it's dependent on the facility that you're taking the child to. So there's a book
Even in clinics?
Even in
Yes.
clinics.
Okay.
Even for pregnant women, we have what is called the antenatal booklet. So there's always a booklet. And it has all the vaccines, it has the months. And usually when you have the vaccine done, whoever has given it, the nurse or the doctor, whoever's given you the vaccine actually signs and puts a date.
Yeah.
And then tells you the next date. So that's the normal way that it runs. So for anybody who's in that age group, usually for until age 5, you'll find mothers are still holding on to that book, even in low literacy areas, even in Turkana and things like that. So they can still come back with that booklet and have it indicated that the child has received the booster. At this stage, you can do the same thing with the typhoid. It can be indicated on that. The same way for adults, we have the yellow book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the same way, anytime you go for a vaccine, whatever it is, it's filled in on the yellow book.
Okay.
Yeah, so even, I'll speak for like adults, we were getting typhoid vaccine for a long time, we would just fill in for the patient on that book. For some of, even in this campaign, there are little cards that are being given out to indicate that you've received. In fact, there are lots of pictures, if you look at MOH, of the kids all holding
Yes.
their cards, so at least they have something. Our problem is we don't have a standardized nationwide electronic medical record, because that's what you'd need, so that later in life you can just click on and say, Ashley got this at this age. So those things might get lost, which is why he's saying sometimes we say it's okay, whether you got it, you didn't get it, we can't remember. This is outside the schedule, it's a booster, it's not going to do anything negative, it's got a lot of positive benefits, so we just go ahead and do it.
At the beginning of this conversation, you talked about the fact that if another COVID vaccine would come out, you'd still get.
Yes.
Is there too much vaccination, perhaps?
I mean, you know, we can't have it both ways. We can't be saying that we want preventative health and we want primary health, because when you look at prevention, yes, we'll talk about diet, we'll talk about lifestyle, but here you have a method that will protect you from getting a disease and the adverse complications of the disease. So I don't think there's anything like too much. I think when you look at the future of medicine, vaccines will end up being tailored to individuals based on your genetics. So the typhoid vaccine you will get will be different from the typhoid vaccine that I get. And that's how it's going to go. Because tomorrow, if I told you I had a vaccine for diabetes, I don't think we're going to say, well, it's too much of a vaccination. If I say there's a vaccine for hypertension, and you know the things we want to see in our lifetime is a vaccine for HIV. So I think as long as you have a prevention, and we keep saying prevention is cure, because we're the same people saying that, oh, doctors want to make money, they want you to be sick, they want you to do tests, they want you to take medication. I'm like, so let's skip all of that, and here's a vaccine, and you don't need to talk to me again in your lifetime. So I don't think there's anything like too much of a vaccine.
All right. I mean, clearly we need to do more mobilization, for lack of a better word. We need to make it aware. Like, people need to know that these are issues that we need to tackle, and it starts at a very young age. Do you visit a number of public spaces with, you know, preaching this gospel?
Yes.
Yeah, how often?
You know, when need, like COVID time, we were going to, I was going to the temples, you know, to educate on the protocols, how to take care of this, you know, wearing the mask and, you know, keep 1.5 meters distance and everything. So when need arises, we go to our temples, we you know, educate them. And the community halls, when we go to our community events, we can educate them. So when need arises, maybe we can go daily or weekly basis. When the need comes, we go. Now we say now 5th to 14th, so we are, even our temples you can see.
Okay.
We are saying please go and take this facility, the free vaccines they're providing, so please protect your child. So that campaigns are going.
Okay.
Just to add to that,
Sure.
I'm very glad that we have a religious leader here, because we were in another meeting recently with her and Madam Vanita from the Hindu Council in the same Global Listening Project. And I'd tell you, we know in Kenya, these are the voices that we actually need to engage, because as the Secretary General of the Association of Muslim Medical Professionals, we are Muslim medics. But I'll tell you, most of the time, if you go down to the village, if I speak to someone about a vaccine, it will not be taken with the weight that an imam or a sheikh would actually. So one of the things we actually do is, it was, even during the COVID period, we had the National Muslim COVID Response Committee. So we engaged members from the Ministry of Health, Muslim leaders, and so on how to and how to engage people and how to bury the dead, the vaccine issue, and so on. And I think as a country, we need to bring all the stakeholders together, because the vaccine hesitancy and any public health measure, someone would actually listen to their religious leader more than they would listen, because as she opened by saying, we are a religious country.
We really are, yeah.
And speaking to the people who are in the mosques, the temples, and the churches is very important to get this messaging properly relayed to the public.
Okay. So then what would you tell those who, because there's that fear or lack of trust in some of our public institutions, what would you tell them? Because as you said, at times it's personal, and this someone, person A has taken a certain stand, and they don't want to be swayed. What would you tell them?
So, from my personal perspective, the people around me, I tell them that I'm one of you, and we all need to do the research. I would not recommend something that is not, beneficial to you. What you need to do is first make sure it's a credible source, the where you're getting your information from.
Yeah.
Number two is, let's not, this is very big, let's not politicize health at all. I mean, and this message goes both to the public and to the government, that, health, let's not politicize it at any cost. So get the information from the credible sources. Confirm with your doctor. There's actually, with the Ministry of Health, there's Vaccines Kenya on social media. Mm-hmm. You can actually go and put a message and say any concerns, and they would be, or they need to be addressed through that. I think you can also dial *271# to get any information that you need regarding these vaccines. Number three is that try to balance between the risk and the benefits of it. Yes, it might not, worst case scenario, cause any benefit, but this is a public health issue. Let's not do it just for me, it's for us, for all of us.
Okay, Dr. we're seeing some aid cuts, and the cost of health has gone up. Are we likely to see such funding cuts affect perhaps our exercise in terms of, or our campaigns in terms of vaccines or immunization by any chance?
Definitely. You see, when you look at the kind of funding that we have here, our problem is that we had funding that was directly from USAID, which is direct US government. Then we have Global Fund, and that also takes money from the US government. However, what we have seen is that in their absence, one is you have different countries stepping up to fill in that space. So you see, specifically with vaccines, you have something that's called Gavi. So that's like a global alliance that deals with vaccines, the Global Alliance Vaccine Initiative. There are other countries that are stepping in to take up that space. And then also it kind of gives us a bit of a wake-up call as a country to say, how long will we continue to wait for aid and support? So we start to say, what is it that we can do in country? Meaning, is there a way that we can start developing the vaccines here? And there was a lot going on during COVID about developing a center that we can make the vaccines here ourselves. We also start looking at different suppliers for medications, so that whatever we can bring into the country maybe is cheaper, still good quality, still at the same level of maybe what an original drug was, but what is cheaper. Definitely funding cuts are going to have an impact, and you'll see other countries will also follow suit and decide that their country comes first. But of course, there's philanthropy. There are people who want the best for the whole world, not for themselves. So they are those kind of people who will step in. You have a lot of private sector engagement. There are different foundations. I just wanted to them by name, but there are different foundations, people who are billionaires, people who are millionaires, other governments that are all now stepping into this health space. And maybe having big entities like USAID and all was actually blocking other people from coming in and doing what they need to do. Like Sujata said, you actually find there's a lot of religious organizations through their communities that actually want to do good work, but they don't know what to do.
Okay.
So through this, they're able to partner. I'll give you a different example, like blood drives. Like at my facility, we do a lot of blood drives with the Hindu Council.
Yeah.
Because you see, through the temple, they'll announce, and you get hundreds of people coming to donate
Win-win,
blood,
yeah.
and you know that's going to our national blood bank, and
Yeah.
you know, and you know that we need those kind of things. So we have definitely funding cuts are going to have a big impact. We will still feel them. We have not even begun, even in things like in HIV, TB care, we're really going to feel them as the year goes on. But we have other people stepping in, and of course, our expectation is our government also comes in and steps in and does what it needs to do.
Okay. We have like 3 minutes, so 1 minute each to give your final remarks. I'll start with you.
This one as a
Final remarks.
final remarks.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Now, okay, if it is a final remark, I urge the parents and the caregivers, please protect your child from these illnesses. Please protect your child.
Okay.
Please, if the child is eligible to take all the recommended vaccines, please give the opportunity to child have this vaccine.
Okay. Dr. your final remarks?
I deal with the voiceless in this field, and I think it's the responsibility of the parents to actually help us look after their kids. And this is a public health concern. I've seen it with my own eyes. Let's work together. Let's raise the concerns with the ministry and hope they'll be addressed in the future campaigns. Thank you.
I'll let you have the final word. And I've just been reminded that we didn't say how long the campaign will run.
This campaign is ending on the 14th,
14th.
Okay.
14th of July.
Right.
But then remember, this is going to become part of the regular schedule. So take advantage of the campaign. If you fall outside the campaign, just go to your nearest health center. We are there. Talk to a professional and protect your child. I'll say it again. Even a single child dying is way too much.
One life lost is one too many.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. I feel like right now I can be a doctor. So much information. But it was a pleasure having you, Dr. Abdallah Bajaber, a consultant pediatrician and the Secretary General of the Kenya Association of Muslim Medical Professionals, also known as KMMP. We had also Sujata Kotam Raju. Okay, I'm getting the hang of it. She is the chairperson of the Hindu Council of Kenya, and of course she gave us her take on how best we can handle this from a leader's perspective. And last but not least, Dr. Shamsa Ahmed, a physician specializing in infectious diseases, and she currently leads the Infection Prevention Committee and the Infection Diseases Clinic at MP Shah Hospital. I hope you've learned something, and if you have, tell a friend to tell a friend, and that's how the message will be passed. We take a short break. I'll be back with more news.